All right. Well, so it looks like we do not have a quorum today, so we are going to just kind of modify this a little bit and move through. So first of all, we'll just call the meeting to order. We're going to skip over the approval of minutes, and we are going to go right to Brad for a quick rundown of the first agenda item, Resolution R6823.
Yeah, so I will, I'll give an overview of the, oh, Jay is here, so
well.
we have quorum. So let's go back to the original plan.
Hold on now. Yeah. Okay. Let's go back to the beginning. All right. So we'll call the meeting to order. Thank you, Jay, for showing up. And so we will, I guess, entertain a motion to approve the minutes that were in the agenda packet.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
All right. In favor? Against?
But I had a question about those minutes.
Sure.
It had a mention of Verona Area School District and Madison Metropolitan School District, and then the Oregon School District was not mentioned. This was in the middle of, oh goodness, we were talking about like what school districts were, I don't remember, basing this off of. Something.
Oh, sure. We're talking about the teen center feasibility. Yes.
If you'd like to make a motion to amend.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the previous minutes to from January to include the Oregon School District.
Second the motion.
In favor?
Aye.
All right. Okay.
So we
right.
have a unanimous in
Yes.
favor of the motion to amend. And then do we want to, I have that Ryan made a motion to approve the original minutes. And so now we'll take a vote on approving the minutes.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
All right. Unanimously carried.
Okay.
All right. So on to, I think we were going to skip, actually we aren't. So public appearances for non-agenda items. I don't think we have anybody here for something other than what's on the agenda. So skip ahead. We're going to be talking about Resolution R6823, the Healthy Neighborhood Grant Program recipient awards, and then after that discuss regular meeting dates and times. So now we will go right into, Brad, your rundown of the resolution.
Yes, thank you. So I'm just going to overview the process for I think some committee members and myself. This is the first time that we're approving or making a recommendation on the funding awards for the 2023 Healthy Neighborhoods Grant Program. So to start with, the process is, and this is the stage that we have passed already, is city staff review and recommendations based on the applications, the review of the applications and kind of the big picture of the Healthy Neighborhoods Initiative. So, we've done that. That was included in the memo, included in the packet. Second step in this process to approve these applications and approve the funding awards is for this advisory committee to review and make recommendations based on the same, kind of Healthy Neighborhoods Initiative, big picture. And then after this, this committee's recommendation would go to the Finance Committee and then the Common Council for the final decision. The Common Council does have the discretion to make changes if they wish, and they're the final approval authority on this. And then after that, the funding awards would be announced. So that is the process. I'll just quickly go kind of do a brief overview of the kind of in general what was submitted, not specific applications, but the kind of the amounts that were requested. And then I think we can move into the public comment, and then we can move into more specific discussion about any of the applications if desired, and further discussion there. So anyway, we for this 2023 grant cycle, we received 9 applications to the Healthy Neighborhoods Grant Program. The cumulative funding request was $124,700. There's a total of $88,000 of funding for this cycle. $15,000 of that $88,000 is specific for Southdale, and $10,000 of it was carryover from prior years, unused funds from prior years. The packet included staff's initial recommendations for funding, and obviously here with the $124,000 of funding requests, we have an exceeding the funding available by about $36,700, so we cannot fund all applications. But I guess all of the, just real quick, in general, of the applications were all scored fairly well. The funding recommendation that we included in the packet, we felt best met the H&I goals. And I guess with that, I think that's probably a good place to stop and take the public comment, and unless there are any kind of broad questions that anybody wants to ask before we get to that point. If not, I guess we can move into the public comment portion. So.
Okay, I think, looks like we have 3 people here who want to make a public comment. I have the 2 forms. Why don't we do the person who is on the Zoom call first? And that is, I'm sorry, I don't see the name. Marcia?
I made this appointment today so that I could weigh in just a little bit, although I did not request that I actually had to say something. But I'm the treasurer of the Fitchburg Senior Center Friends. I've been on the board now a number of years, and so I've appeared before the council a couple of times. I'll keep this brief. I'm concerned that that if we don't find some way to get people who want to attend events at the Fitchburg Senior Center, but they can't drive, they're less able to pay for a taxi, and our bus service is going to get worse. So I was hoping that this particular grant application would give us some funding to experiment with a way to engage more of the people who come to the Fitchburg Senior Center who are unable to drive. I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I guess next on the list, William Horns. Yeah, any of them. Yeah, the one with the green. Perfect.
Thank you. Is this on? I'm good. My name is Bill Horns, 2642 Penwell Circle in Fitchburg. I'm here speaking for the Fitchburg Senior Center Friends, which is a nonprofit 501c3 corporation that works to advocate for seniors and provide monetary support to the Fitchburg Senior Center activities. We raise funds in various ways, including sponsoring travel and tours and holding an annual pancake breakfast and other activities. I know we are one of a number of organizations that have submitted proposals for healthy neighborhood funding. Tonight, as you review Resolution R 6623, I ask that you consider amending it to include funding for our proposal, and I assume you have a copy of. Do all the members have a copy of our proposal? for transportation for seniors from their homes to the senior center and back. As you know, Fitchburg maintains an excellent senior center, offering a variety of recreational, nutritional, educational, and therapeutic programs. The trouble is that it is hard for seniors to get there. Public transportation options are very limited, and many seniors simply cannot drive. They just have no way to get to the senior center. I'm here tonight with Jill McCone, Senior Center Director. She can summarize the services of the Senior Center for you, if that would be helpful, and she can describe in better detail this transportation problem. I'm also chairman of the Fitchburg Transportation Commission, so I can comment on our interest, the interest of the commission, on the senior center transportation problem. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and the last public comments, Jill McCone.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight, and I'll try to make it brief as well. This is a great grant program, and certainly all of the agencies that have applied are deserving. I'm here today to advocate on behalf of the Friends, too, and just give you a little bit of history of what the Friends have done over the years for transportation to show their commitment and their passion and their ability to manage a transportation supplemental contract. So back in 2001, I wrote grants to CDBG for 4 years, and we managed to get $37,500 in grant funding for transportation. So our push for transportation has been going on for a really long time, I'll just say that. The Friends, through that time, would always do a match to the CDB grant funds, and then they would subcontract with a provider so we could offer supplemental transportation. So in addition to the 2001 to 2004 CDBG funding, the Friends, after the CDBG funding, we stopped applying for those grants. They took over the supplemental contract and paid for it on their own. So between the years of 2001 and 2012, the Fitchburg Senior Center Friends spent a total of $27,900 on transportation. This is to supplement, this is to serve the residents of this city that could not drive. In 2012, they stopped funding because they contributed quite a large amount of money, about $100,000, to the renovation and the addition to the senior and the community center. So they needed to take a break and kind of replenish their funds. And also at that time, the city started to discuss the transit study. And so in 2014, I actually served on that transit study when the city looked at alternate ways to move people across the city. So 2014 and 15 was all about the transit study. From that study came the ride share from 2017 and 18 that they piloted. That didn't end up being super successful. And so, you know, it kind of goes to show that we've always been behind transportation, particularly the Friends. And again, throughout that, the Friends managed this subcontract. They paid the bills, they worked with the provider. The senior center registered people for the rides. And as Bill alluded to, we have very limited transportation in Fitchburg. Obviously, the Madison Metro doesn't come down this far, only for a commuter route. But what we do have is a county contract. And so that's a contract that truly the county holds with the transportation provider. And because we are a recipient of county funding for nutrition, transportation has to follow along. So that county-funded transportation is primarily only for lunch. So our people that need transportation, they have to come for lunch, which, you know, that's not a bad thing. But they only can be here. They arrive about 11 and they have to go home at 12:30. So anything that happens outside of those hours, folks that don't drive can't come to. So, you know, we have recently built some affordable senior housing that wasn't here a few years back. And with that affordable housing, we have a lot of new units. And then oftentimes in affordable housing, people don't have cars. So the High Line up North Fish Hatchery, 160 units, and now we've just taken on Town of Madison, Novation Commons. I can't even do outreach to those communities except to say, if you want to come for lunch, we think we can get you here. But if you want to come for aerobics, yoga, tai chi, walking, cardio, drumming, ukulele, ping pong, quilting, knitting, sewing, greeting cards, chess, bridge, euchre, men's, women's group, movies, special events, and speakers, sorry, I can't get you here. You have to find your own transportation. So, looking at this grant opportunity, I think that the Friends are committed. They're serving the areas that fall within the Healthy Neighborhood Initiatives. They've proven that they can do this. And, I guess as a city employee who has been employed and been here since 1993 and have worked, 90% of their years on trying to get more transportation, which is proven by the grant funding and all I've done, it can be kind of frustrating to know that the city is supporting outside agencies when I'm trying to do the same thing just within my own city department and do better for the people that I have been assigned to serve. So I thank you for the time. I know it's a tough decision, but as Bill said, I hope that you will reconsider moving their grant application forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I guess we just kind of open discussion on the resolution and any questions or comments that anyone wants to make. Ryan, you have your hand up.
First of all, I just want to say thank you to those folks who showed up and spoke up about the senior center. In reviewing the applications, that was the one, I got to be honest, that was the one piece that I thought was unfortunate was that the senior center wasn't getting funding to help with transportation. In my day job, I'm a community social worker. So I'm familiar with the senior center. I'm familiar with what they do and the services that they provide. And so I don't know where it goes from here, what we can do. I would like to see the senior center again funding for transportation, especially with, all the affordable housing that's being built in Fitchburg. So I don't know, if there's a possibility of, using some funding. I don't, the struggle is now, we have the recommended, the organizations that have been recommended to get funding. Where would we take funding from in order to support the senior center? That's the only question that I have, but I don't know how others feel, but that was the one that I thought that it would be important to try and assist with the transportation piece for them.
I should jump in here. Thank you, Ryan. I kind of glossed over this when I went over the overview, but what's in the packet is the staff recommendation. This committee, through the discussion, can make changes to that recommendation before forwarding it onto the Finance Committee and Common Council. Like Ryan mentioned, the thing to keep in mind is since we have more applicants than we have funding, we'll have to take, if you want to move any of the funding around, we just need to be very clear where, out of that recommendation, where the funding is coming from and where it's going so that we can modify the resolution appropriately before we send it on. So that is something that this committee can do. And I guess this would, if that's something that you want to do, then we can discuss it and kind of form the motion appropriately, or the amendment and then the motion appropriately. So.
Personally, so thank you so much to everybody who spoke. I think that transportation for seniors is incredibly important. I mean, especially if we're trying to encourage seniors to not be driving once, they're, I went through this with my grandma and she was really resistant to giving up her driver's license. So I feel all that. I'm a little concerned with the idea of one portion of the city of Fitchburg trying to fund another portion of the city of Fitchburg when it feels like the best solution there would be to advocate for the Common Council to change the budget. So to me, I'm very conflicted about whether that really makes sense to fall into the jurisdiction of this committee to try and correct a wrong that was done by like the Common Council of like how they, I mean, I'm not necessarily, okay, I should not say that it's a wrong. They made a decision about how the funding goes. And I just felt that this program was more for grassroots efforts within the community to bolster itself. So that's my comment on that one. I also have other comments on other programs, so I don't know if we want to like talk about other programs or, but I'll be done with talking about that for now.
Well, I think the discussion is sort of open, so, I mean, if you have other comments, I think we can probably entertain them
Well,
at large.
I guess one other comment that I had about the Fitchburg Senior Center Friends was that I really understand the limitations within, you know, what transportation options there are, but I'm not a huge fan of like sending money to Lyft or Uber. That doesn't seem to benefit the city of Fitchburg residents maybe as directly as it could. Like, I don't know if there are other options for like rideshare programs, and then like we could, you know, somehow have like vouchers for like, you know, like, oh, thank you so much for being a citizen who's willing to volunteer or, you know, get paid a little bit to like transport your neighbor. You know, maybe something more like that. I'd maybe be more in support of.
Yeah, I get your point about, you know, putting money into local organizations or local community-run opportunities to provide the services rather than, you know, multinational corporations, sort of thing, kind of keeping that money local so that way it can continue to have that cumulative effect on the local economy, which is a great idea. Our public comment is over, so we. Okay. Yeah.
Ask a specific question and then have them comment on it.
Good question. I would be fine with that, I guess. Sure.
Question for our audience members. Can you comment a little bit more on the idea of, you know, the money going to maybe these multinational corporations as opposed to staying in here,
Yeah.
City of Fitchburg?
For sure. I put that in there because right now transportation is it's having a little bit of a crisis. I mean, we were trying to find a wheelchair transport for one of our case management clients, and I mean, we couldn't find anything for like a week, and this person hadn't been to the doctor for years and was wheelchair bound. So I wanted to leave my options open. I remember in the transit study, Uber and Lyft was an option that the city was looking at contracting with. I love the idea of using residents and reimbursing them, although that would be a lot of liability and a lot of work, but I have looked at that. So, you know, my ultimate goal would be to contract with a provider. You know, like right now the county contracts with Transit Solutions, and there's Capital Express, and then oftentimes cabs. I know that's what Dane County uses a lot, is they just use Union Cab. So Uber and Lyft wasn't my first option. I just, you know, transportation is hard these days, so.
Sure. Yeah. As they say, any port in a storm. You know, I know that, you know, bus drivers for school routes has been terribly challenging to find drivers for. So I imagine all transportation is very similar. So I understand that perspective as well, for sure. You know, when I look at these funds and the calculations kind of done to put money in certain areas, I guess my first thought was, if we do decide to recommend a different level of funding for some of these applicants, the difficulty, I think, is going to be determining if we reduce the amount of funding for one group, how is that going to affect their ability to actually provide the services that they've applied to actually provide, versus, you know, if we cut $1,000 from a program, is that going to mean that entire program doesn't work? Or is it going to mean that they simply have to scale back a little bit, or maybe they have to cancel one of their 7 events they're planning, or something like that? And, that's a really in-depth question that's really hard to answer without having the people to talk to and to discuss. So that's the only thing that has me a little hesitant about determining in the committee meeting now we should recommend that a certain group get less funding, because we don't have that information. We don't know how that would affect the plans for that group. So, and I agree, Ari, with your comment that, as a city budgetary issue, this should be something, or could be something that could be addressed, to deal with the shortfall of funds that are available to take care of these sorts of things, which of course is outside the purview of this committee for sure. So I don't know. I don't have an easy answer. That's just my thought process.
Hey, if I could insert some comments here,
Sure.
because I don't see a raise hand button on the screen here, so I apologize for that. And I'm driving, so it may be a little noisy, but the Common Council really struggled with the budget this year. And you hear that all the time, but this year it's really come to a crisis situation where back, I think it was in around 2002 or 2003, the state imposed the levy limits on municipalities and said, basically, you cannot spend more than this much money. And it's based on growth and some other factors, but there's a limit to how much money the city can spend. In the meantime, we have city staff members who need to have raises, and we have to add staff, especially with the acquisition of the town of Madison. And we have to add staff anyway as the city continues to grow within our other our pre-annexation boundaries. So there's a lot of pressure on the city right now to spend more money, but we are prevented from doing so by the geniuses in the state legislature. So where we are right now is probably later this year, I hope later this year, we are going to have a referendum to ask the citizens if we can increase the city spending, which means increasing the property taxes to fund some specific things. Among those things are we need to add a number of firefighters to city staff. And we probably need to add somebody in the HR department. And one of the things that the council talked about in the middle of last year was the idea of it, and this came about as the discussion of the Madison Metro redesign of the system was going on, and we were talking about how that's going to affect our residents. So one of the things that we talked about was the idea of creating a Fitchburg shuttle that would basically go from the west side of the city to the east side of the city and have a few stops in between at some key places like the library and the senior center and, Target and the senior housing buildings that we have, and eventually have other connections to the existing Madison Metro routes. So I am hoping that we can come up with a cost proposal for that and have that incorporated into the referendum as well. Because if that's in the referendum and we are able to get the referendum passed by the residents of the city of Fitchburg, then that's a permanent increase in the amount of money that we have available to do these things. Now, unfortunately, that if that happens and if we're able to get the referendum done this year, that funding isn't going to happen until 2024, which is next year. It's 9 months away, so maybe that's long enough. Maybe we can make do for that amount of time. I don't know, but my vision when we created the Healthy Neighborhoods program, and as I've come to know it over the last couple of years, is that this is designed to be building programs within those neighborhoods, the four identified neighborhoods, not not necessarily funding transportation for the senior center. And as much as I want to do that, I just don't feel like this is the appropriate means to make that happen. So I like the staff recommendation for how this money should be spent, and I think that's the direction we should probably go, and we should really work hard to get the referendum passed if we have that happen later this year.
Thanks for the context, Jay. It's good to know what's going on with the council. Yeah, so public comment is done with, unfortunately. So it would have to be, I guess, a specific question from a committee member at the moment. But yeah, unfortunately. Apologies. Yeah, any other comments or questions about the recommended funding amounts or the resolution?
Yeah, I have a question about the Latino Academy of Workforce Development. I love the idea of funding, workforce development. The GED program sounds great. I'm a little concerned about the City of Fitchburg funding the CDL program for two reasons. One reason is that being a truck driver is a very it's not a good job for your mental well-being, as well as there is a request here for $6,850 for diesel fuel, truck rental, and insurance. Now I want to add a caveat to this comment of I understand that a lot of our community is built on trucks and trucks bringing in our food, trucks bringing in our stuff. I get that, and I understand that I'm also part of that problem. That being said, I had some questions about like whether other people feel at all uncomfortable with that, or like if we should just kind of move past that and just be like, well, you know what? We in this society want someone to do these jobs, and let's fund this. I guess that's my question.
Well, I guess I'll just say that I understand where you're coming from, and I agree to a certain extent that the money that we spend to support programs via this is an extension of what we see as beneficial not only to the community, the healthy neighborhood, but the healthy, I guess, world to a certain extent. So clearly, we wouldn't even if it was beneficial to the citizens, in the community, we wouldn't necessarily spend money on an organization that, say, to be very extreme and not at all try to make this an even comparison, but to say like we're going to, do some sort of paint event in the park, and then we're going to dump all the paint in the in the sewer or something like. There would be some limits there, like that. If that were something that came forward and said, "Hey, we want funds for this," we would look at that and probably say, "You know what? I think if you change that event to be a little bit more friendly, or the program to be a little bit more friendly to the environment, we might be more willing to look at funding that event. That said, we also have to live in the world that we live in too, and like in the meantime, even though we may want to reduce use of fossil fuels or something like that, there is also a limit, particularly within this committee and this grant program, to how much change we can affect versus how it affects people in the real world and in the immediate present. So I get the idea. I have family members who've been truck drivers, and you're right. It can be a very lonely and challenging endeavor and career. At the same time, like, access to fresh produce in a community can rely on that, being delivered by truck. So we need people to do that work, and it pays well, relatively, or can, and it can be an opportunity to lift people in a community out of poverty, and build the community. So it's, I don't know. I would hesitate to alter funding based on that, at least for this grant program, myself.
If
If I
could-
may make a comment again. Oh, hi, Ryan.
Sure.
Yeah, I completely agree with both of your comments, and I think it's difficult when you have positions that are internally in conflict in your own head. It's like, yeah, I wish there were fewer trucks on the road, but right now there's a huge need for these drivers, and we have a lot of people in Fitchburg who need some help with employment. And this is something, I think this is a 90-day certification. They can get the certification within 90 days, and then they can have a job that pays pretty well, at least as long as we have gasoline powered trucks on the road. Or, for that matter, because the CDL isn't limited to a gasoline powered vehicle. So, I mean, if eventually there are electric or some other types of options for vehicles, that would certainly be available. But I think, we do these things based on the conditions that we have today. And the conditions that we have today are, we need drivers. And if there are people in Fitchburg who can do those jobs, they just don't have the appropriate certificate. Well, I mean, if we can do something to help that happen, that's a good thing. Even though it comes, even though it's, the trucks aren't going to go away if we don't fund this. They're still going to be out on the road. So, but it could provide the opportunity for a resident of the city to be able to get one of those jobs, at least while it lasts. And I don't know. I think that's a worthwhile thing for us to fund.
Ryan?
Yeah, thank you. And I want to thank Ari for bringing that up. I share your concerns too, Ari, but I also agree with Ryan and Jay with the fact that, so as I mentioned, my day job is a social worker, and I work with a lot of folks that are struggling with poverty, and I know the Latino Academy. I know their work. I know they do really good work, and they help a lot of people. And the way that I see this is kind of what you mentioned, Ryan. It's a step forward for folks who are living paycheck to paycheck, and it's a possibility for them to kind of get a little bit further ahead and hopefully eventually get themselves out of the financial situation that they're in. So that's kind of how I see it. But yeah, I do share your concerns too, Ari, about the environment and the impact of these types of these types of careers on the environment. So
You know, and I appreciate, Jay, your mention of the fact that these CDL licenses are not limited to gasoline-powered trucks, and as we go forward, we see in the news a lot in the last couple of years that a lot of automotive manufacturers are moving very swiftly towards electric and hybrid forms of transportation, not only for passenger vehicles, but also for delivery vehicles. And while the discussion certainly could be had that, high-speed rail or other forms of transportation for freight might be even better for the environment than, say, an electric truck, certainly electric trucks are better than gasoline-powered ones, and the CDL licenses being applicable for that, this gives a particular portion of the community an opportunity to get jump-started in a field where there's going to be a lot of technological innovation over the next 10 to 20 years. And so if they get their CDL license now, that may drive that industry even further and to provide them that opportunity to ride that wave, perhaps, which could be of benefit both to them and to in the long term to the environment.
I also have questions about Big Brothers and Big Sisters because they're a wonderful organization. A lot of the funding that they're requesting seems to be for ongoing expenses. Let me pull it up. It's page 44. Okay, here we go. They want City of Fitchburg to be paying for, let's see, telephone and internet, $1,000, office supplies, $1,000, liability insurance, $2,000, program event expenses, no, that's one time, background checks, printing and posting, let's see, funds to support families, $600. I guess the telephone, internet, and then liability insurance definitely felt to me, that's $3,000. Those really feel like ongoing expenses. I'm looking at page 51, and I was thinking that since this is more of like a one-time payment, it would make sense to only be funding like one-time expenses. And I say this from the perspective of I see that we're not fully funding, a good number of these programs. Some of them have been funded as much as they've requested. Some of them are being funded a lot less than what they've asked for, such as Aldo Leopold Elementary School, Parent Faculty Organization, New Bridge, some others. And I'm curious about the idea of, opportunities for shuffling a little bit of money around here and there. So the Big Brothers and Big Sisters, $3,000 there seemed kind of like a question mark in my mind, I guess. Any thoughts?
Well, I'll throw a thought out there. Back when the United Way was building their building on Park Street, the city of Fitchburg did put some resources into that building that were kind of one-time expenses. We spent some staff time to help do some internet wiring and some things like that. And I thought at the time I was the mayor and I authorized staff to do that because they certainly provide services within the city, and that was a good way to help support the organization. Looking at the list, it's a $73,000 program, and they're asking for $15,000 from the city of Fitchburg. I guess they could take the 15,000 and shuffle it around in this chart a little differently. But those numbers don't seem unreasonable to me for the cost. Like telephone service, they're talking about that over a 9-month period, so that's maybe like $150 a month, which is not out of line for what they would have for what they would need to execute that particular program. It's not like we're paying the whole phone bill for Big Brothers Big Sisters. I think they did come up with a proportional share here. So the liability insurance seems a little high, but liability insurance is expensive, and given the types of events they're having, it might just cost that much. So I don't know. I would like to see the program move forward, and if we need to shuffle stuff around on the spreadsheet here, I guess that's fine. But I think either way, the amount of money that we're contributing is a good amount to get this program to happen.
I guess I have a question regarding as the funds that are dispersed, right? So they're dispersed at the end of the year when the group provides the paperwork and the proof that the project happened and that the expenses were incurred, right? So their expense sheet here on inside this document, says, okay, $1,000 for telephone or internet. And we said, well, we're gonna give you $15,000. What happens if their internet costs are $600? Are they allowed to shuffle around that cost if instead printing and postage instead of $300 became $600? Or are they required to use each section of funding how they say they're going to use it? Or is it literally just, this is what their estimates are for each section, this is the total amount of money, and as long as they can show that they spent that amount of money on something related to the program, that funding goes through?
Can I take that? Very, very good question, Ryan. So historically, if one of the applicants or one of the, what am I doing? Okay. Some of the project didn't turn out quite the way they had planned, they can make a request to modify those buckets, so to speak, of funding. So historically, it has happened with some small modifications. I'm not aware that, say, for example, the liability insurance came through a lot less, so they're going to move it to telephone. What has been done in the past is, for example, we realized we weren't going to be able to have this particular event, so we've modified the next event. So it's a little bit different. The specific answer to your question, it has not been done that way.
Okay. I mean, I'm not seeing in this particular, well, I guess there is a line for program event for like food, location, rental, supplies, right? And we all know that inflation has caused an impossible ability to budget how much food is going to cost, let's say. And if they're planning on an event for September, how do we know what, 100 hot dog buns or whatever, they're gonna buy for food is gonna cost in September now? And so they can make an estimate, but if that amount goes up by 10% or 15%, whatever it is, and they find the ability, somewhere else to save some money to be able to kind of move that money around a little bit, sounds like it's maybe a good opportunity if the occasion arises. I guess on the flip side, I'm a little concerned about, the idea of, well, they could say, well, we need $1,000 for digital advertising, and then they don't do any advertising to save that money to spend it on something else, and it just automatically just goes wherever they want it to go.
Historically, that has not happened.
Okay.
Generally, the monies need to stay in the buckets that they put them in. Generally, in my experience, every one of those buckets, what the city is funding is just a very small portion. So whether it's an event or whether it's insurance, the city might be only funding 10% of that overall kind of piece. Because of course, most of these applicants before you, they're working in neighborhoods even beyond our 4 neighborhoods too. So it's usually just a portion of what we're funding.
I have kind of a tag-along question with that. So many of these programs are not, unfortunately, we just don't have the funds to like fully fund all of these programs. Like I would just love to just like, okay, we fully fund everything that was requested, yay. Being that we're limited in funds. So just for example, Newbridge got half the amount that they're asking. Aldo Leopold Elementary School, got 8.5 instead of 15. I'm not necessarily like questioning that, but I am questioning, do we put any sort of stipulations on like, well, the 8.5 that we're funding, 8.5 thousand that we're funding is like this portion of your request. But we're specifically requesting that the money doesn't go towards, this portion that you've asked for. Is there anything like that? Or is it just kind of like, sure, do what you think is best with the, slightly less amount of money that we're giving you?
I'll just speak for myself, and Deanna can add anything if she feels. But I did not, for any of those partially funded applications, I was not thinking that it needs to go towards a specific portion of it. And that was something I struggled, any partially funded thing was something I struggled with, just because I don't know how feasible it will be to take part of the funding and apply it to it, or whether that kind of interrupts the entire program. So I guess my initial thought would be that it would be flexible to go towards any part of the program that they applied for.
I personally don't have any further questions. And I want to thank staff for the hard work.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other question? Oh, Ryan, yes.
I just have a quick question. I just wanted some clarification on how the decisions are made by staff. Do you guys have a scoring sheet? Is that what you guys do? I'm just not familiar with how you come to the conclusion of these agencies and getting the funding.
Yeah, I can talk about that a bit. There is a scoring sheet. At least this year, for me, it was not very helpful. They all scored almost the same. So I did not really use those. I mean, I used them initially to kind of determine who would be funded. I think there were the two that we did not recommend funding were the lowest scorers on the scoring sheet, but pretty much all the other applications were very close in scores. So, and that is something that I may want to bring at a later date to the committee is maybe some revisions to the scoring sheet so that we can talk about the criteria to use to score them for future years. But anyway, that's besides the point. But so that was used initially. Some of the other factors that went into this decision was the match amount, like how much was each organization putting towards. So that was one of the reasons. Well, I'll just use the Aldo Leopold PFO as an example. Although I thought their program was very worthy of funding. There's their match amount was lower than a lot of the ones that we recommended for full funding. So that was just, I guess one of the factors in how we came to the decision on what to recommend as far as the proportion of funding goes. Does that answer your question? Was there another one in there that I missed?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
So I actually have a question. So when you put out like the request for applications, right? And the requirements that they have to, the contents they have to submit for consideration, is that like a staff design thing, or is that a thing that is decided by the grant program itself? Like, is that something that you can change, as far as what sorts of things that you require that they provide?
So, Deanna, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was, I don't know if it was initially put together by staff or if it was kind of collaborative between staff and the committee, but I believe we used the same criteria, the same grant announcement as previous years.
Okay.
That is something that could be refined if the committee wanted to.
Sure. Because my thought here is, we've kind of touched on it a couple of times here, where we're talking about when we're determining how much funding to give to each applicant, right? Whether it's you as staff or whether it's us talking about this in this meeting, we lack the ability to know how much of the program that they're applying for, how much could they do with a lesser amount of funding than they're requesting. And so if part of the requirement for applying is that they also have to just give us a general idea of, if you aren't fully funded, what sorts of what would you be able to scale your program relative to the amount of funding? Is the full production of your program or event contingent upon that full funding? Because I think the other issue is, well, if we do decide to give a little bit less money to one of these organizations, we won't know if they're able to actually use that money until the end of the year, when they tell us the event was actually able to go off, the program was successful here, we're actually applying for you to finish that funding. And so that money then sits, and then if it's not used, then we have to use it the next year. And it's like, it would be nice to know, because if they need $10,000 and we're thinking, well, we can only give you $8,000, maybe that money could be split up and put towards other programs that can run at maybe a slightly lower scale, or could, potentially use a little bit of the money and then maybe try to crowdsource or publicly source some of the other events as well. So I'm assuming that's part of that process.
Yeah, I think that would be a good modification to the application to include something like that. That was, those partial funding considerations was something I struggled with. Like, would it be better to fund fewer applicants fully or partially fund more? And I think that's definitely open to discussion and or the committee could set a policy for future rounds too, if there's a preference for that, or like you suggested, we could modify the application to ask about the scalability of the program that they're applying for. I think that something like that might be a good idea to consider for future rounds.
I guess attached to that, and you may have touched on this at a previous meeting when you talked about the program itself, as we were starting to learn, since a lot of us are newer or haven't had as much experience, yourself included. In previous years when we've done this funding, have we always, or have we commonly had more requests than we could fund, or more applicants, lots of applicants, or is this year substantially different than in the past?
I'm probably not I probably won't have the best answer on this, but I have in the past I have looked at probably 2 years that had fully, if I'm remembering correctly, I think 2 years had less requests than funding available, and I think one or possibly more had more funding requests than what was available. So anybody else, if you know offhand, correct me if I'm wrong, but.
Yeah, I think I'm the only one that's been here, been with this committee since the beginning. And I don't remember exactly the years, but yeah, I think Brad, you're correct. When we first started, we had more funding available, and I think that was the funding that rolled over. And then I thought it was the last couple of years we've gotten more more requests than we've had funding for. But you're saying that we only had one year of that happening.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I did not look back at every year either. So out of the years I looked at, that's what I remember seeing. So it's possible. I think there were a couple years there that I hadn't looked at. So.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know. I mean, that's data that would be good to know both for our committee and for the council as a whole to know, is there a lot of public interest in this grant program? Because we're looking at, I'm assuming with this next budget, we're looking at renewing this program, right? The Healthy Neighborhoods Initiative. And so if we have that data to know that we have a lot of community organizations and groups that are interested in this grant program as part of the initiative, that could be kind of a bump to not only renewing it, but looking at how would we maybe increase the funding a little bit, if that's an option, right? I mean, like Jay said, we have a limited bucket and of funds to distribute, but if this is a good pathway to providing those funds in a way that helps build, on the purpose of the Healthy Neighborhoods Initiative, then I think that should be something that should be considered. And I think as the committee, we could advise the council to that effect, to a certain extent, yeah. All right, any other questions? Jay?
Yeah, let me just make one other quick comment. I'm sure I probably missed something, but in the opening pages of the staff report, there was the discussion. There was that little chart that had the 4 neighborhoods and how many recommendations for funding by staff. I think it would be helpful for me to have the particular program, the particular recommendations sorted in a different chart by the neighborhood. So I see, table 2 has the stuff being recommended by staff listed by the type of program it is, I guess. But I would like to see it sorted by neighborhood, and I didn't see a chart that had that in here.
Yeah, Jay, there is a column for neighborhoods served on the right hand of table 2. But yeah,
right.
It's not sorted by that, I guess.
And then we had the 15,000. We had the 15,000 that was dedicated by the council specifically for Southdale. And I see that we have the River Food Pantry there with a $6,000 request that's being divided up between 2 neighborhoods. So a breakdown of how much of that is for Southdale and how much is for the North Fish Hatchery Road neighborhood would be helpful, I think. And actually a further breakdown on the other ones that are serving all neighborhoods. Because we, at some point we're going to have to go back to the council and say, you guys gave $15,000 for Southdale, and this is how it got used. And I guess it's disappointing to me that we didn't have requests that would have utilized all of it. But there are, you can only do so much with what you've got. So, I guess that was the main comment I had, is just maybe a little bit more analysis of exactly how the money is getting spent in each neighborhood.
So I think I should clarify. I got the column in the table. I should clarify that the River Food Pantry, the total recommended funding, just to use that as an example, was 12,000, 6,000 for Southdale, and 6,000 would come out of the norm. I guess the normal funds, and that would be split basically 50-50, the 6,000 from the normal funds for North Fish Hatchery and the 6,000 for Southdale and that left column on table 2, the recommended funding, that's the recommended funding out of the typical Healthy Neighborhoods grant pool, and then it's worded poorly, admittedly. The column to the right of that, the recommended funding for Southdale, that is the funding specific to Southdale that we recommend putting towards that application. And there could be, if I removed another column here, we could add the total funding in there so it's a little bit more clear. But that's how it's split up in that table 2 there.
Gotcha. Well, I guess what I was looking for was something, not just Southdale, but I'd like to know how much we're spending in each one of the 4 neighborhoods.
Sure. Okay. I see what you're saying now.
Other than that, I like the presentation of this. The staff did a great job of going through. This was a lot of paperwork to have to sift through and make sure that the applicants were complying with our requests. So thanks for all the work that you did to make this happen.
Thank you.
Sorry. I also have to say that, I'm looking at this lower total in your table here, and your footnote that, there's $15,000 of funding, council provided funding for Southdale, and the proposers only requested $13,500. On one hand, I'm kind of impressed that we had proposals that included enough funding to come close to the $15,000, given the fact that Southdale is so new to our city. On the other hand, I think that there's, this is going to be the council's job, obviously, to determine future funding and that sort of thing. But I can definitely see that if in the first year we've already got $13,500 in requests for that neighborhood, that will probably drive additional demand in further years for more funding. So I think we'll probably see more of that as we move forward into future years, assuming we renew the program and everything in the next budget.
Any other questions from anybody? If not, and if the committee wants to move forward with the staff recommendation, then you could motion. Basically, I guess the motion would be simpler. You can motion to move forward, with the staff recommendation in the memo, and forward it to the next committee, or finance committee, and then common council.
I can make a motion. I motion for this body to accept the staff recommendation for funding as described in table 2 of the agenda packet.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Unanimous approval.
Thank you, everyone, for your thoughtful questions and discussion.
Okay, the next and final item on the agenda is to discuss a regular meeting date and time.
Yeah, so I wanted to put this on the agenda so that we could nail down a regular meeting date and time. I think, and it'd be nice to schedule it monthly, but I don't anticipate we'll meet monthly, so it's easier to cancel meetings than it is to schedule a new one every month. So I know, I guess I'll ask everyone here, does this time and day generally work for everyone, or would there be a better one for anyone?
Well, personally, I would prefer later than 5:30 because I'm usually working until 6 or 6:30, and I've actually spent the last hour of this meeting in the parking lot of my last customer, so waiting for the meeting to end. So, but do you recall, Brad? Do we are there 12 meetings of this committee budgeted for in the budget?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, I can't remember how many meetings of this committee are budgeted for.
That's something that I would have to check on for you.
Okay. Well, we didn't have meetings for a couple of months, so I mean, I don't think we're going to run into a problem this year, but we should know what that number is, so that we can schedule things accordingly.
Yeah, that's something we can look into. Jay, what time works best for you?
Well, 6:30 or 7 usually works better for me. It's just 5:30 is it's like right in the center of my workday. Well, not the center, but it's definitely part of my normal workday because, I catch a lot of customers when they're coming home from work. So, but I also understand, we have 2 staff representatives that come to these meetings, and you guys don't necessarily want to have to go back home and come back here, or, sit around at your desk for an extra hour either.
And, we also have the seasonal shifts, right? During the summer, it stays light out later, and, in the winter, it gets dark earlier, and so, the later into the evening a meeting might go in the winter, the colder and potentially snowier and icier things might get if if people do show up in person. And kind of on the flip side, if it's later into the evening in the summer, that means, if we have a relatively short meeting in the summer, if starts at 5:30 and we're done by 6:30, you still have several hours of daylight. Whereas if you start at 7:30, I guess you'd have hours of daylight before the meeting, but I don't know. I mean, we could probably split the difference too and just say 6:30. For me, any time after 4 in the afternoon works for me. So that is a non-issue. For me, it's more days of the week because Tuesdays and Thursdays definitely do not work for me. Mondays also are not great. So it kind of limits it to like Wednesdays, and nobody wants to meet on a Friday, I don't think, ever. So.
I personally prefer earlier. I got kids in activities after school, and there's a lot of transportation stuff that needs to happen on my part. So with picking up after their activities and things like that. So, so I think the latest I would prefer to go would be 6. I don't know what other, if it would be starting at 6.
Ryan, are there any days that are better for you, days of the week? Or I guess maybe I should ask more directly, does the first Wednesday of the month work for everyone?
For me, it works for now. I never know what's going to happen come the next school year because the schedules always change with the sports and things that my kids are in. So I think we can just go with it from my end.
We can always revisit it if things change. All right, thank you, everyone. That was all I had.
All right. Do we have any department reports?
There is no department report this evening.
Oh, okay. All right, then announcements. Nothing?
Mr. Chairman, I would move for adjournment.
All right. Have a second?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.